Welcome to Royal RBCM at Home. My name is Kim Goff, and I'm a learning program developer at the Royal BC Museum. I'm coming to you from my home on the territories of the Lekwungen-speaking people in Esquimalt, British Columbia. In this series, we're talking with staff of the museum who've been working from home about their work and their research. Today, we're talking about paleontology and what it's like to properly curate and look after fossils at the museum. To talk more about this today, we have three Royal BC Museum volunteers. We have Fernanda Pacheco, Lucas Goulet, and Carol Barbon. And they're here along with the curator of paleontology, Dr. Victoria Arbour. Victoria is a vertebrate paleontologist and evolutionary biologist, and she is the leading expert on the paleobiology of the armored dinosaurs known as ankylosaurs. She joined the museum in 2018. Now today, we're not going to talk about ankylosaurs, but rather a very large collection of a donation of Maccabee fossils. Victoria, can you tell us more about the Maccabee fossil collection?
Yeah, I sure can. And I think if it's okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about it while showing some pictures of it. So I'm going to share my screen
Excellent.
because it's much more fun to look at fossils than just have me talk about them. So today we're looking at some fossils that are from after the age of dinosaurs. So they are about 53 million years old. So the end of the age of dinosaurs is about 66 million years ago. And these are fossils that were collected from a site called the Maccabee Fossil Beds. And that's located near Kamloops in sort of the southern interior region of British Columbia. These are really cool fossils. So the fossils are actually mostly plants and insects. So they're very different from what I usually work on as a dinosaur paleontologist or a vertebrate paleontologist. Usually I work on things that have a backbone, and especially things that, like dinosaurs or animals that lived alongside the dinosaurs. But BC has really amazing fossil sites with these Eocene age, sort of 53 million year old fossil forests, basically. And so back in 2017, 2018, we received a really generous donation from the Leahy and Langevin families of about 18,000 fossils kind of like these. This is just a very small sampling. And so that is a lot of fossils to get all at once at the museum. It's probably one of the biggest single donations of fossils that we've ever had at the museum. So these are all from a single locality collected over many years by these two families. And they include really beautiful fossil leaves, things like we've got some things like a sassafras leaf. So this is sort of an ancient relative of sassafras. Sassafras is what root beer used to be made out of, so I think that's kind of fun. We have beautiful ginkgo leaves, so leaves from ginkgos that would look a lot like what you might find today. And then some really weird ginkgos. We always just call this one the weird ginkgo. So still similar to a modern one, but with very sort of different leaf shape. And then all kinds of other things. We've got things like metasequoia, the dawn redwood. We've got pine needles. We've got fir needles, flowers, almost anything that you could think of as a plant, we've got examples of in this collection. And so leaves are by far the most common thing that we find in this fossil assemblage, but there's also a lot of other cool things that basically fell into these ancient lakes and got preserved in the mud at the bottom of the lake. So the lake had fish in it, so we get beautiful fossil fish. We also have very rare fossil crayfish. Crayfish fossils are super rare in the entire world, so it's pretty cool that we actually have a drawer of multiple crayfish fossils in the collection now, and an amazing diversity of fossil insects of all different types and representing many new species that haven't even been identified for science yet. And we've got some really cool things like fossil leaves with little bites taken out of them that show how the insects interacted with those plants. So those are like plant-insect interactions, and that's pretty cool. So how do we actually bring all of these fossils into the museum and get them ready to be used in things like exhibits or for learning programs or for scientific research? It was a huge effort by the former collections manager and some of our conservation staff to actually pack all of these up into these U-Haul boxes and then bring them on site to the museum. And then when I arrived at the museum, we continued the work of unpacking them. And getting them into the cabinets. So all of the fossils right now, when they come out of the boxes, it's kind of a mix of like plants and insects and fish and bird feathers. And so in a collection, we actually want to have those sorted into at least different sort of higher level categories like plants and insects. And ideally, they get sorted into like a single drawer will have a single species, for example. And so that's where the volunteers have been coming in for the last year. I did a quick tally the other day, and we have at least 19 volunteers who have contributed over 900 hours to unpacking these fossils, getting them onto trays, helping with getting them cataloged, and in particular, helping to identify and sort them into different categories, which I think is really cool. And I wanted to share a video of what that actually looks like. We did some time-lapse videos a few weeks ago of Carol, one of the folks who's joining us today, and just to show sort of what the time that it takes and a little bit of the tediousness of this job in actually just getting everything unpacked out of these sort of paper wrappers and put onto these trays with nice foam lining them. So that we can then work on sorting them later on. So this is just sort of the first step, and it takes a while, and we had 18,000 of these specimens to unpack, so it's been this huge team effort between former staff members, current staff members, and this amazing team of volunteers. So this just gives you a bit of an idea. We don't actually operate at this like light speed, but this gives you an idea of what exactly happens at the very early stages of bringing the fossils into the museum. So I kind of want to mostly hand it over to the volunteers now and really let everybody else talk about what it's like working in the collection and what they've enjoyed about it and what it's like as a volunteer. So I'm at the museum every day, and so I think about this all the time, and I thought it would be fun to hear about what it's like as a volunteer in the collection.
Who wants to take that on? Lucas, I'm going to pick on you then.
All right.
Lucas, let's start with you.
I don't know. I don't know where to start with that, actually.
Well, maybe tell me a little bit. So when you go into the collection, tell me about what are you doing on a typical day when you were allowed to go into the collection?
No, there really isn't a typical day, because kind of day to day it changes what the priority is. Some days you come in and it's, okay, we need to box this thing up and ship it out immediately. And some days it's, okay, we're going to stand here and unpack fossils all day. So it really does change. But starting, like I've done things like house the fossils. So sometimes the fossils are a little bit loose in the trays. They're just kind of laid on top of the foam. And so we've taken all those out and made little like tracings of them and cut out the foam so that if you wiggle the drawer around, if maybe there's an earthquake or something, those fossils are going to stay intact. So that was a large part of what I was doing when I first showed up, was housing the Maccabee fossils that were already sorted and cataloged and making sure they were safe in their drawers. And then I've done a lot of unpacking of Maccabee, a lot of moving and like reorganizing the boxes. We moved them to a storage area for a little bit and then brought them back up. And then I've also spent a lot of time working on some of the fossils that came out of the Site C, which I think we're going to talk about later, more in depth, so I can do that later.
Fernanda, is there a part of the job that you find more challenging than another?
I wouldn't say challenging. I think just because I'm like quite new, just like at the beginning, I was like scared to touch them almost because I was like scared they would crumble and stuff like that. But it's not very challenging. It's quite fun. I found it quite soothing to just unpack, put them in the little trays and then put them away. So yeah, it was quite fun. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I'm sure it's always very busy. You don't sit there wondering, what am I going to do?
Oh yeah, no, tons of boxes to get through. So it was great.
And Carol, how about you? Is there part of the job you enjoy more than another?
I like pulling the trays the best because, especially at first, you pull out a tray and there's all these spectacular fossils on there, and it's just a breathtaking moment to see all of them for the first time, and even the second and third time, it's the same thing.
Nice, that sense of awe and that amazing opportunity you have to connect to the past. That's pretty unique, because often when we visit a museum, we can look at it, but we can't touch it. And where you are and what you're able to do, it lets you touch something that is millions of years old. It's amazing. Victoria, there's a question here. It comes from Kyle. Kyle's wondering, are there any work or volunteer opportunities this summer or maybe coming up in the winter? And who's eligible? Like, what do you look for in a volunteer?
Yeah, that's a great question. So ordinarily, I take volunteers almost all the time based on sort of how much space we have to work in the collection. So for right now, the museum, because of safety concerns around COVID, we are still closed to the public, although we are reopening soon. But we're going to put a bit of a pause on volunteering for the rest of the year to make sure that we're able to operate safely and yeah, we're just make sure everyone's health is at the forefront. So we're on a little bit of a break from volunteering right now. But when we reopen, some of the things that I look for in a volunteer is basically just someone who is excited to work with the fossils, who can handle them safely. And that's about it. I usually do a lot of the training. I try to pick tasks that everyone's going to be able to do. We have a variety of different tasks. If there's something that you really don't like doing, you don't have to do it necessarily. Some of the jobs that we do involve the things like unpacking the fossils. We also have been working on like sorting the fossils. So we've got some little guidebooks in the collection about how to identify different very broad levels of plants, because I'm also not a plant paleontologist. So I'm sort of learning this as we go too. So we're all learning together, which is a lot of fun. And we also do some things like, this is going to sound really funny, but we paint little white labels on the fossils where the catalog numbers will go eventually. And then people with like sort of steady hands and an artistic bent and good handwriting might help with some of the labeling and cataloging. Yeah, so we have a whole lot of things. I guess that's a really good prompt for me to show one of the other big collections projects we've been working on that Lucas mentioned, which was actually cleaning up an ancient bison skeleton. So maybe I'll share my screen again for a moment and show a couple of pictures of that. Let me just bring up my sharing screen here. I'm always so much slower at this than I want to be. Let's see, here we go. So we've been working on this really cool, mostly complete Ice Age bison skeleton. It's probably about 10 to 12,000 years old. So it's kind of in this awkward like fossil. It's like a teenage fossil. It's not quite an original bone anymore, but it's not like quite a fossil like most people would think of. So it's very fragile and delicate. And so this was collected from up in the Peace region, and it came in like pretty clean. So each bone was kind of wrapped up in tinfoil and was relatively clean, but it still has a lot of just like mud and sand caked onto it. So we've had a couple of volunteers who have been helping out with this particular task, including Lucas, and I'll show another little time-lapse video that I've got here. This is Jacqueline Richmond, but Lucas is hiding in the corner. Jacqueline was our collections manager for a while at the museum, and yeah, this work involves kind of taking these fossils and then very gently removing some of the sand and sediment that are stuck to them. You can see we're using like dental picks and toothbrushes. And again, this is sped up, so we don't usually operate at this light speed either. Yeah, so working on sort of getting it all cleaned up. We'll use a little bit of water, and a little bit of a special consolidant called B72. So this is a special kind of plastic dissolved in acetone that we will drip onto the fossils to preserve them. So it'll sort of soak into the bone and fill in some of those porous spaces. It can be used kind of like a consolidant or like a glue. Yeah, and we basically just work on cleaning these up. So there's Lucas sort of madly working away in the back there as well.
Victoria, I don't think we're seeing what you think we're seeing.
Oh no!
Yeah,
Okay.
we're not seeing the actual time lapse.
Oh,
I'm just seeing a smaller version of your PowerPoint.
Oh, let me take a look if I can fix that. Thanks for letting me know, because it would be a shame if you guys couldn't see that. Let's see. Okay, I'm gonna do my sharing screen again. The wonders of Zoom technology. All right, let's try it. Let's try that again so that you guys can have a little bit. I won't do my whole spiel. There we go. I know what the problem. This was my mistake. I did the application window and forgot to switch it over between my different videos.
It's
So
showing,
this is.
oh, I'm still
Oh,
seeing
is it
just
working now?
a black screen, but I see a play
Oh
bar.
no. Oh, okay. Let's try one more time. Thank you all for bearing with me as we try different. I'm just going to do sharing my whole screen rather than the application window. And let's see if this works
okay,
now.
that looks like
Is
it.
this looking a bit better?
Yes. This looks
Amazing.
like Carol.
Oh, this is okay. So this is Carol working. Sorry, I think I'm gonna have to skip the time lapse of the bison thing because I've managed to close it. I'm gonna have to spend a lot of time re-finding it. So let's stop sharing that. But basically, the bison prep is really cool. It's basically very sort of time-consuming, tedious work that requires a lot of care and dedication to being gentle with the fossil and getting the dirt removed without actually damaging the fossil itself. And so Lucas did a lot of help with that over the summer, along with Jacqueline. And yeah, so we have this whole variety of like different volunteer tasks that really help out with the collection.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's just talking about the volume of the collection and the number of fossils you're dealing with. It would be impossible for yourself and your sometimes collection manager to get through everything without all of these extra hands and skills. Carol, someone is, I'm going to direct this to you, Carol, but there's a question here from Kyle asking, what's the coolest fossil you've seen so far?
It would have to be this little spider or an arachnid. It looks like daddy long leg, but yeah, it was beautiful.
So it's like a spider, essentially.
Well, I'm not quite sure the classification of it because it's a bit iffy if daddy long legs or spiders or not. So to call it an arachnid is the safest bet.
Yes, you have to generalize sometimes. Now, Kyle, we didn't get to see you working on the bison bones, but what was something about that job? Is there a new skill you've learned from that, or was there anything about that that was particularly fun or maybe intimidating to do?
It was very intimidating at first, for sure, just because the bones are so large. You really have to like be careful where you put them and how you place them on the table and everything. And then some of the bones were also damaged during excavation. When they found it, I guess they hit it with like a backhoe or something. So like the femur was broken and just kind of shattered. Like half of it was just gone, basically. Yeah, various parts were just pretty much unsalvageable. So like sometimes I would open up a package and it would just be a clump of dirt with like a bunch of little bone fragments in it, like just this big. So that was really intimidating. I would always just like put that aside for someone else to touch because I didn't want to touch those ones. But one thing that I found, like one of the bones that sticks out the most was actually the femur that was broken. Because like when I picked it up and like held it down, all the dirt just kind of like fell out of it, and then I got to like look inside the femur and see just like all the little like bits of bone and stuff inside. It was really interesting to look at.
Yeah, absolutely. Fernanda, do you have a favorite part?
I think just like, well, like mostly with the unpacking, like just like looking at all the fossils that were there. And I think we got especially excited if we found a fish. Those were a little bit rare, so those were really fun to find. But yeah, just like the fact that you're holding something that's so old, like in your hands, is just, yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. So Victoria, we've recently heard that we'll be going back or be able to go back to the museum as staff people. What are you looking forward to doing when you get back there? What's going to happen?
Yeah, well, I'm certainly going to miss having the volunteers around, so I'm looking forward to the day we can welcome the volunteers back. But yeah, some of the work will be similar to what I'm doing now, you know, conducting research on dinosaurs. I'll probably be spending a bit more time with these Maccabee fossils myself. Yeah, so those are some of the things I'm looking forward to doing, is sort of reconnecting with the fossil collection after a couple of months away.
In terms of the Maccabee collection, is there a certain question you're pursuing or something you're hoping to find in particular?
Yeah, so the Maccabee collection is of interest to quite a few researchers beyond myself. I'm pretty interested in the vertebrate fossils, so things like the fish and the feather fossils I'd like to learn more about. But there is a research associate at the museum, Bruce Archibald, who is very interested in the insects. So he comes and studies the insect taxonomy and identifies new species. And we also have colleagues elsewhere in Canada, like David Greenwood out in Manitoba, who is very interested in the leaves and what we can learn about ancient climate by looking at fossil leaves. So that's one of the really cool things about a collection of this size is we actually have like more than one fossil to actually do statistical tests on. So as a dinosaur person, I'm really excited if I get like half of a dinosaur. But here we've got, you know, hundreds and hundreds of examples of different species, and we can actually start to do some bigger picture studies. One of the things you can do with fossil leaves, if they've got a nice margin around them, is you can actually use the shape of the teeth and how many teeth it has to reconstruct the climate of ancient ecosystems. So there's just so many questions you can ask with a collection of this size, and yeah, it'll be more than just me studying it when you have something like this.
So speaking of those researchers, one of the ways researchers can find out about those collections if they can't come on site is to use our database. So there's a question here from Sandy asking about database progression. She's wondering approximately what percentage of the invertebrate paleontological collections now have their data fully integrated with the new data system? And could you speak to what the criteria has been or will be?
Ooh, that's a very interesting question. So I'm not sure about in terms of our invertebrate collection specifically. So invertebrates would be like things that are not having a backbone and not plants. And so in terms of our total collection, I think we have about half of the fossils cataloged and in the current version of the database. In terms of our Maccabee collection, we have probably about 2/3 of it cataloged into an Excel spreadsheet right now, getting ready to import into our new database. And in terms of criteria, that's a thing that we're still sort of working on. I mean, ideally, we just get everything cataloged, but it takes a long time and requires a lot of expertise to get that done. So it's going to be an ongoing process, and it's always a work in progress at any museum, getting everything cataloged and accessible in the database. So we just kind of chug away at it one project at a time.
And second part to that question, just wondering, is there a difference between what's retrievable for the general public versus a professional researcher?
There are a few differences. One of the things that we usually hold back a little bit, except for researchers or industry users that need access to it, are specific GPS coordinates. And that's mostly to protect fossil sites. And this is a sort of an industry standard across the board in most paleontology collections. So that museum is always archived and cataloged at the museum, but we will usually keep back like really specific site coordinates from just everybody. And that, again, that's really to protect sites that might be very vulnerable to either accidental or intentional damage, which and both happen, and that's okay. Sometimes people don't know what's happening and they just accidentally wreck something. Other times people might more maliciously damage something. And so the idea is just to keep some of that information a little bit back. But most other information is accessible in the database. Yeah, the idea is that you could ideally look up like different species and find out how many we have in the collection and know generally where they're from in British Columbia. And I mean, in an ideal scenario, eventually a lot of those records would also have photos with it too, so you could look at them. Yeah, so it's great questions.
Yeah, and actually it's a good question as well. It's a nice segue because on Tuesday with At Home, we're going to be talking with collection manager from the Indigenous collections about how to use the databases and how to search online from home, because there's so much that you can find out without having to come into the museum, and behind the scenes access will be restricted. So it's going to become an even more important tool. So he's going to do a live search, show you how to use all those tools. And that applies to all of our collections. So if you're able to join us on Tuesday at noon, you can see that. Now, as we mentioned, staff are going to be able to go back and to be behind the scenes, but there's still some wait time and phases to go through before volunteers can come back. What is something that you're looking forward to doing when you do come back? How about Carol?
Just being back.
Having some pattern and to your life again, or is it just, do you miss the fossils?
I miss the pattern. I miss the fossils. I miss having that quiet, relaxing time away from my kids.
Yeah, the fossils don't talk back, so that's a nice thing. Fernanda, what about you? Are you looking forward to anything in particular?
Yeah, honestly, yeah. Again, just being back, it was really nice to like come to the space and like just relax after school and everything. So it was a nice way to like just calm down after everything. So it was really good.
Nice. And Lucas, also to you.
The same thing, just being back. Again, it's such a nice space to be in. There's big windows and it's nice and calm, and you're just kind of calmly sorting out fossils. And also just like every time I get home from a shift at the museum, I usually end up Googling something that I've touched that day. So like having that kind of like added curiosity in my life, be good to have that back.
Such a good, yeah, that's a lovely thing to inspire that curiosity, but then to also follow up on it. We've made one of our viewers curious. Kyle is wondering, what types of dinosaurs do we get often in BC?
So the answer to that is none. None of them are often found, but we're working on that. And so the fossils that are very common in BC tend not to be from the age of dinosaurs and from on land. So we get wonderful age of dinosaurs marine fossils on Vancouver Island. These Eocene plant and forest communities are very common. And even things like the Burgess Shale, those fossils are extremely abundant at a few places across the province. Yeah, so dinosaurs are still pretty rare. They take a little bit of effort to go find. And yeah, it's a good reminder that they're not the only fossils out there to find and study.
Yes, you can.
Even if I like them.
And you know, Kyle, just the way Lucas said, he goes online and has a look. You can go online and you can go to the learning portal at the Royal BC Museum, and there's a pathway about Buster, who's BC's newest dinosaur. So you can learn more about Buster and one of Victoria's recent discoveries. One last question here from Ron. Ron's wondering about the status of the Maccabee deposit. He heard it was sitting in an interpretive center. Is that the case, Victoria? Can you tell us more?
So I'm not sure exactly what that might be, but most of the collection that was collected by the Leahy Langevin families, that is now at the Royal BC Museum. So that's what this collection represents. And there are Maccabee fossils at other museums across the world. And there is a collection at Thompson Rivers University. So that might be what that is referring to. But certainly, I think one of the biggest collections is now at the Royal BC Museum, this set of fossils that we're working on.
Excellent. Well, thanks for clarifying that for us. And thank you all. Thank you, Lucas, Carol, Fernanda, for coming in today. I know Victoria is looking forward to having you back, and we're looking forward to that as well. Members and locals might be aware that the Royal BC Museum is getting ready to reopen on Friday, June the 19th. I'm thankful for all the teams who have been hard at work ensuring that the museum is safe for staff, volunteers, partners, and visitors. You can find out more about our reopening on our website. We will be continuing our at-home program. So this one on Tuesdays and Thursdays, at home with kids on Wednesdays, and at outside. And we'll be doing that for the foreseeable future. And links for those programs are posted on the museum's website. So finally, thank you all for joining us. Thank you for including us in some of your screen time, and keep taking care of yourselves and one another. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. I understand my dog was